Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. We're in West Philadelphia, born and raised on the playground is where Ahly spent most of his days chilling out, maxing, relaxing in Kenya, shooting some hoops when a couple of guys said he's up to no good. You better get your back to Edinburgh. He's got one little fight, his parents got scared and they sent him back to Scotland where he's starring out there. But today, besides my bad rapping, sets us up for our chat with Alasdair Howorth, our cross-platform reporter here on The Whistle. I'm your host, Zayn Nabbi. But Ahly, our man on the ground at the FIFA Club World Cup, is coming live from Lincoln Financial Field. Ahly, it's the first time I've ever teed you up around the briar like that. So I don't know if it's a
Well,
good thing, a bad thing, or something we want to keep going.
well, I'll just say I'll say to the listeners and viewers, that was ad lib. Zayn did not kind of. I was unaware of that. So Zayn's rapping skills coming to the fore. Yes, I am indeed in Philly, not West Philly at the moment, although I am staying there, just outside or in the press box of the Lincoln Financial Field, having just witnessed Wydad make their first appearance at the Club World Cup with a 2-0 loss to Man City.
I mean, listen, this was a game that could have gone ugly. It could have got really bad. So a 2-0 scoreline on the surface of it, Ahly, seems really good for anyone out there who might have not watched the game. What was your takeaways from it?
Yeah, I mean, Zayn, we've made no secret of it coming into this Club World Cup that Wydad were the weak link in African football of the 4 teams coming to the Club World Cup. They came third in the Botola Pro. They've sacked Rulani Mokwena in May. They were linked with Cristiano Ronaldo and Hakim Ziyech before this Club World Cup. They had to settle for Norden Amrabat and Bert Myers. But, so coming into this game, they're playing the holders of the Club World Cup. Yes, for those, who can't remember, Man City did actually win last season's Club World Cup. This was a City team where they weren't starting Haaland, but they were starting, new guys, Tijani Reinders, Ryan Cherki. And so there was a bit of a sense of, okay, this could get ugly. I'll be honest, that was me coming into it. And 3 minutes in, it got ugly. City took the lead, and there was a real sense of, okay, like, where are we going to go from here? Because this could get ugly. Even thinking you have Auckland in the back of your mind. Obviously, you never expecting it to be that bad, but you have it in the back of your mind. But to credit to Wydad, I think actually I would say 80% of this game they played really well. They gave City trouble. For Zanzi listeners, Lorch and Mailula were excellent, particularly Lorch. He kind of created some really great opportunities, and kind of on another day, I could even easily have seen Wydad kind of scraping a 1-1 draw and giving City a bit of grief.
Just looking at some of the comments made just in the aftermath of the game, Phil Foden speaking to the broadcaster Channel 5, talking about Wydad, said, fair play to them. They were a top team on the counter-attack. A lot of chances that we had to deal with. Happy with the performance and happy with the 3 points. What did you make of his assessment?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's not wrong. If City did dominate, but if you look, the shots taken, City took 15 and Wydad took 12. So like, they weren't creating clear-cut chances, but they were creating good chances. There was that one chance in particular when Amrabat played the ball over the top to Lorch, who kind of chopped his man, and if he hadn't have slipped, you could have easily seen him scoring in the end. Mailula's shot was saved by Ederson. So I think, yeah, Wydad can actually be very pleased with the way the game went. I think for them, the big frustration is that they're a team built on defensive structure, built on defensive culture, and they let into 2 silly goals, in my opinion, particularly the second, just a kind of very simple corner to the back post. And Boutouil, obviously former Mamelodi Sundowns centre back, like being beaten, in not necessarily in the air because he volleyed it in, but being beaten by Jeremy Doku, that shouldn't have happened. So for me, couple of individual mistakes, but otherwise Wydad can actually be very pleased. And we were saying before we started recording, actually, I think Wydad should be happier than even Esperance. I think they showed a lot more going forward than the Tunisians did.
I mean, look, the tournament is not over for Wydad. They are in a really tough group, so they have Juventus up next. I mean, what would you say should be a way they can build off this respectable loss? Is it to do the
Yeah,
same thing, or can the Romantics dream of something else?
No, I think they've got the platform there and the kind of the system. They kind of sprung a surprise on us. They played with a back five. Normally they play with a back four, and they had both Mufid and Mufi playing as their wing backs because the normal left back is injured, so they're playing a right back at left wing back. And they had two debutants, Ferreira and Palmeiras, at center back alongside Butil. So this was a very new team, saying like coming together. Obviously, Mohamed Amin Ben Hasham has only coached the team, I think, for 3 games in the Botola Pro. So it's all kind of coming together for them. So actually, given where they were even just a month ago, I think they're in a good place. And I think they approach it the same way. You saw that Mailula, Lorch, and Amrabat front 3 did work really well. They took off Mailula for Mohamed Rai, who is also an excellent player, the top goal scorer this season, and he kind of went on the left and Lorch through the middle. For me, it's tricky, right? Because you need to play Rai, but he's playing on the right wing where Amrabat has now come in, and Amrabat is captain now. He's not the star, but he's kind of the big name, the kind of. He's there both for his talent and his experience, his leadership. So you can't play him there. On the left is Lorch, who's probably been their best player in the last few months. So then it's like, okay, well, where do you play him? Because Mailula's been their most creative player. So do you drop Mailula into a 10 and play Rahi through the middle? It's hard to know. But I actually think the way they approached it, I think actually is really good. And I think if they just get that back five more familiar with each other, a bit more structure, and I think the big thing is confidence. They now know how this tournament works. They know that they can play against City and be competitive for most of the game. And I think they'll take encouragement from that going into this Juve game.
No, definitely, Ali, and it's so important that they continue to build on this. For those of you out there who are listening to the show, I'd like to encourage you to please interact with us. Post your comments here on our YouTube page if you're watching here, or whatever podcast player you're listening on. Post your comments. Also, find us on social media. We're on X at the OTW_podcast, the same on Instagram, same on TikTok. Find us, interact. Ali's our man on the ground, and he can take your questions. Ali, in that spirit, I'd love to bring in some questions from some of our Sundowns fans out there who've been consuming your content and our content online. But I say your content because I think yesterday you filed 3 podcasts in a day, which might be a record here on The Whistle. So we're doing things as the whistle goes, as regularly as we can. And some of the comments after Sundowns' very morale boosting 2-0 win over Ulsan HD. I'm going to read some out to you and then we'll take some comments. One of the comments from Enthusiastic Tent. I have a feeling in me that Sundowns is going to do well at this tournament. Lonwabo Bong Tabe says to you, Ali, you are doing amazing work, sir. Thank you for the content. Another comment from Shbo. He says, Shbo I7H, that's the exact name. Sundowns played well yesterday, especially in the first half. No helicopter football, not just aimlessly kicking the ball forward. Good passing game. Only after Zwane got substituted, things started to fall apart a little bit, but they played well. Ali, would you agree with his assessment?
Yeah, definitely. I think you could see this was not Rulani Mokwena's Sundowns team. This was definitely Miguel Cardoso's Sundowns team. Yes, they didn't create loads of opportunities, but I think that's through kind of their own desire. I think that's the way they wanted to play. They wanted to kill the game by just keeping possession. They didn't want to, open up too much, because a couple times they did kind of overextend themselves. Ulsan were getting in behind, particularly in left back. Divine Lunga was kind of caught out a few times in that first half in particular. And so, I think that's spot on, because look, Sundowns aren't Wydad. Sundowns aren't Ahly. They're not a team that's going to go direct. They have to play them Asandawana way, but they have to adjust it. So for me, the big question is, how are they going to approach the Dortmund game? How are they going to approach the Fluminense game? Are they going to slow down the possession or the tempo of the game? Because for me, that's the big question, is can Sundowns compete with the tempo? Because particularly that Dortmund-Fluminense game was a really good watch, 0-0, but both teams really powerful, really pacey. And I think for me, that's the big question, is how are Sundowns going to manage that? Because they had a lot of possession in this game. I think they had, in the first half, they had 75% possession, which is more than Bayern Munich had against Auckland, even though Bayern won 10-0. So that's the big question: is how do you win? How do you compete with Dortmund? How do you beat them? How do you draw with them? But how do you do it in the Sundowns way? Because if Sundowns go and try and approach it like Wydad, they're gonna get smashed. That's not how Sundowns play football. So that's the big question for Cardozo.
Well, Ali, I just have a few more comments and one more Sundowns related question. Ayanda Lubello says, the best analyst ever. Wow, Ali. I can't believe he's talking about you and not me. Um, we had another comment from Belushla and Schumer, said, call me delusional, but we will surprise and represent Africa. We certainly hope you will. We have Vuyo, who balances up, saying, I see DVD losing to Sundowns, not balancing up, backing the comment. The game will be more open because they need to win, but I don't see them having the legs for a full 90 minutes in the heat. And then there's a comment that does make me laugh a little bit. And it said, one guy said it right, and this is from the Brainwave 7154. And this is the comment. One guy said it right when he said, imagine the Yellow Nation losing to a team that sounds like a TV brand. It's just not happening. I'm sorry, it cracks me up. It cracks me up. But I have one question for you, Ali, and it's from Sagodi Rametse. And he says, my question is, will Dortmund chase the running Sundowns on the counterattack and the space behind for Rainers to run into? It's not going to be that easy for both teams. Africa is catching up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is interesting, right? Because Dortmund, on the one hand, under Niko Kovac, are not this. We think of Dortmund, we think of Jurgen Klopp and Thomas Tuchel, we think of blood and thunder, we think of high intensity, constant pressing and things. And Niko Kovac isn't that. He's a defensive coach first and foremost. So, and we saw that against Fluminense. They were quite happy for Fluminense to have a lot more of the ball. It was quite even. So, that's for me what's going to be so interesting, because I think, on the one hand, Dortmund might feel, okay, we're playing a team that we think we should be beating. Let's dominate the ball. But at the same time, they'll know Sundowns. They'll know that Sundowns dominate the ball, kind of whoever they play against. I think Sundowns are probably the most possession-heavy team coming into this tournament. Probably of any of the 32. I'm happy to be proven wrong. But for me, that's where the question lies, is because I think the big positive from the Ulsan game was Ikram Rainers. He cut through that team 2 or 3 times. He had a disallowed goal narrowly for offsides. That was kind of a carbon copy of his actual goal that stood. And for me, because that for me was the big question, is if Sundowns play against these teams, Sundowns have a very technical, talented attack, but they don't have much pace. Ribeiro is not going to be beating a man for pace. Same with Sales. So for me, then it's okay. You have Rainers. He's shown that he can beat players. He's strong. He's fast, and he will run those channels. Then it's the question, okay, maybe then this is the game for Tashreeq Matthews, to come in off the left wing. Obviously, he was at Dortmund, so there's also a narrative kind of element there. It would be great to see him score against his former club. But yeah, maybe you bring in someone like Tashreeq Matthews, who has a bit more pace, or same with Modiba, who's a strong guy who's going to compete. So for me, that is the question. I think it'll be tight possession-wise. I don't think Sundowns will dominate, but I don't think they'll be dominated either. I reckon the possession stats will probably be in the 50-50 region.
Sure. And Ali, we'll move it on now with Al Ali. But I'm not sure if you noticed behind me, but I've got Mandela, loyal to the man, my president. And of course, we have 2 South African jerseys on the wall. One being that of Sundowns. For those Sundowns fans, we know you'll be very excited. For those wondering out there, I'm a Golden Arrows fan, but I do want Sundowns to kick on and do well at this tournament. So we're all behind them. And of course, I don't know if you can see, but I've got a cricket jumper there, Ali, because we are the ICC Cricket World Champions. Had the privilege of covering that last week. But I know this is all football heavy and football mode. So I digress, just to glorify South Africa. Best country.
Then this is a football podcast. Let's keep that Proteas nonsense out of here.
Spoken like a true kid.
He was this bad when the box won as well. Courtney was even worse. Yeah, can't even stay on topic.
A piece of cooking up on that. But to bring it back to Al Ahly, obviously the giant of the African continent, the champions of Egypt, as it currently stands, unless they lose their court case. They've obviously got Palmeiras coming up next. They drew in the opening game against Inter Miami. The hopes and expectations in many ways are on Al Ahly, given their pedigree, given their history. How do you think things will shake out against Palmeiras? They're obviously getting a lot of coverage here. They drew their opening game with Porto, so managed to take a point from them. This group very wide open.
Yeah, and I think both Palmeiras and Al Ahly had very similar opening games in that both of them should have won. You know, Al Ahly were smashed Inter Miami in that first half. You know, you think of the amount of chances they had. Wissam Abu Ali had one chalked off for offside. He had another one-on-one that he should have scored. Another one-on-one that was chalked off for offside. Imam Ashur had that chance when he was played through from Trezeguet. And you know, obviously he missed, and we could be critical of him, but we now realize that he missed after he'd already broken his collarbone. So I think we can't hold that too much against them. Palmeiras the same. They should have beat Porto. They dominated that game. They were the better side. So it's kind of an interesting one. I think the big thing is losing Imam Ashur for Al Ahly. I think, you know, Zizou came in was good as well, and Trezeguet is also talented, but losing him is such a big loss. He's such a talisman for this team. He's so direct in the way he picks the ball, turns, drives, and playing kind of off the shoulder of Wissam Abu Ali. So for me, it is going to be a tight one because, you know, I think Al Ahly has shown that, you know, they can mix it with the big boys. Obviously, Palmeiras are the favorites. I think Palmeiras have shown that they're not to be messed around with. Their excellent team, you know, obviously coached by Abel Ferreira, who won the Libertadores with them back to back a couple years ago. These teams have played before. I think Al Ahly actually beat them 4 years ago, and then but also lost to Palmeiras. So, you know, there's a bit of history, and I think Al Ahly will back themselves. Look, like I said, Palmeiras are the favorites. I think in this game we'll see a bit more of a defensive approach from Al Ahly. I don't think they'll take the game to them as much as we saw against Inter Miami. But in that Inter Miami game, let's not forget, Inter Miami had most of the ball. Al Ahly are very comfortable playing in that deep block, whether it's the 4-3-3, the 4-2-3-1, the Christmas tree formation that they actually went with. They're very happy sitting deep. So what we can expect is, I think, a slower tempo game. Palmeiras don't want to rush it and let Al Ahly kind of use their physical dominance to kind of accelerate the game. So I think we'll be seeing a game in which Palmeiras dominates the ball. They try to get players like Estevao on the ball in those kind of pockets. And meanwhile, Al Ahly are trying to close those up. Marwan Attiah, I think, again, had a brilliant game against Miami. I think he's so key in that position. And then it's a question of, can Al Ahly go the distance? Because that, for me, is what let them down against Inter Miami. They were amazing for 45 minutes. Good for another 15 minutes, and then really struggled the last 30 minutes. It was hot conditions, so they really struggled with the kind of humidity of it. In New York tomorrow, I'm driving up to New York today, so I'll see what the weather is like there, but I don't think it'll be as hot and muggy as it was in Miami. But having said that, it's a 12 o'clock kickoff here, so maybe it actually will be worse. So it'll be interesting to see how both teams deal with the weather. But for me, it's going to be a tight one.
Well, you know, a lot of the discussion has been around Jose Riviero and his decision, Ali, in that opening game to substitute Ahmed Zizou in the Inter Miami match. Now, for close followers of African football, everyone will know that Zizou was one of the stars at Zamalek. He made a transfer just before the tournament to go to crosstown rivals Al Ahly. You know, that's like somebody leaving Pirates and going to Chiefs, or Boga Juniors and going to River Plate, or United and going to Liverpool. So, yeah, it was quite controversial. But the talent of Zizou is unquestionable. But he was substituted in that opening game, and you know, let's face it, Rivera's faced a lot of heat online for it. What do you think? What kind of role do you think Zizou will have in the next game? I mean, is this as big a deal as it's been made online, or is this just normal tactics and normally what happens during a game?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, you know, it's his debut. Obviously, he didn't start. He came on for Ashur, but I think you could see he has tired legs. And I think this is the big thing about Al Ahly is yes, Ashur is a big loss, but they have so much depth in those two positions, that kind of wide players, stroke number 10s. They have so much depth. So, you know, they were able to bring on Mohamed Afshar, Tahir Mohamed, and Hussein Al Shah, and Nate Gradisar. So, like, that's so much talent without even bringing on, I think, like, they still had Ben Sharkey on the bench. And so for me, that isn't as big a deal. I think the big question will be, how does, you know, Trezeguet respond? Because obviously he was at the heart of the controversy when he missed his penalty. He obviously took it off of Wissam Abu Ali, who is their designated penalty taker. Other than that, I think up to that point Trezeguet had an excellent game. But for me, the kind of whether it's Zizo or even Tahir Mohammed who comes in for Ashur, I don't think it's a huge deal. I think Zizo will start, but I don't think it's a massive deal that he kind of necessarily got substituted. Because for me, the amount of depth they have is really important. The one player I would like to see, which we didn't play, is potentially Aliou Dieng. I think he's a much stronger, more combative midfielder. And maybe not quite got the same kind of technique that Hamdi Fati or Mohammed Ali Ben Ramdan has, but it'll be interesting to see which of that midfield three they go for. But for me, Zizo is not necessarily the important player. For me, the one who's irreplaceable up front for me is Wassam Abu Ali, because I think he is the one who runs the channels. He is so strong. His movement is excellent. I think for me, he's the kind of key one because he's irreplaceable. Whereas for me, Zizo is important, but you have other good players in that position.
Sure. I mean, look, what kind of a statement would it be if Al Ali could beat, a Brazilian team and one of the strengths of Palmeiras with the stars in their field? I mean, a lot of the international media has been portraying this tournament very much through the lens of Europe is the favorite, and we understand why. I mean, the best teams and the best players reside on that continent, and they're attracted from all over the world. That's more what I'm getting at. The money and the clubs drive that and the prestige. Um, and then there seems to be an acceptance and tolerance and obsession with comes out of South America as raw talent and an ability to push forward and playing the right way. And then it's almost like the rest of the world does not exist. Whether you're from Asia or Africa, or Central or North America. So my question to you is like, what kind of a statement would it be if Al Ali could win against Palmeiras? And what are their chances? If you're a betting man.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be tough. Look, Palmeiras are the favorites. There's no doubt about it. I think if it was Sundowns, if it was Esperance or Wydad, I would not back them. But I think Al Ahly, they've been here and done that. They've played these Brazilian teams. They've played the likes of Al Hilal. They've played these European teams in the Club World Cup before. So I think we saw today with Wydad, they were overawed by the occasion. I think that's what let them down ultimately against City. Al Ahly, there's none of that. They are the stars. They know that, and they can compete. So it would be a huge statement, I think, for the world in terms of a big upset from that perspective. But from Al Ahly's perspective, I think that's what they do. It's their job. This is Al Ahly. That's what they do. I think the problem is Al Ahly missed such a big chance against Inter Miami, and the pressure is on. They have to get a good result, and honestly, they have to beat either Porto or Palmeiras. So for me, that's where it's going to be interesting. Whereas Palmeiras, they know, okay, we get a draw, we're playing Inter Miami. Inter Miami are the worst team in this group, based off the first round and based off of the form coming into this tournament. So I think for them, there's less pressure because they know we draw with Al Ahly. And then Porto maybe beats Inter Miami. Then Al Ahly and Porto, no matter how they do, as long as Palmeiras beat Inter Miami, they go through. Whereas Al Ahly, they have to get a positive result. So the question is whether they can kind of cope with that and whether that dictates how they approach the game. I don't think it will. Jose Rivero is a great coach. We both know that. And he's also a very patient coach. And so I think we'll see a tight, cagey game. I don't think it's going to be a big, exciting one. And I think it's going to be settled 1-0 or 0-0.
Sure. Ali, I wanted to sort of take your temperature. I know you're going to be moving from, you've been to Miami, you've been in Philly, you're going to be heading to New York, as you say. But my question is one where I think a lot of the focus has been on some of the empty stands. I say focus, the discussion, the talking points, and some of our European counterparts has been some of the empty stands and poor ticket sales that we've seen at the FIFA Club World Cup. Al Ali and the Wydad fans certainly have brought fantastic atmosphere. Sundowns were very small but really loud and colourful, showing what the Yellow Nation can bring to the party. But I think we all look at that Chelsea game that was played in Atlanta with, I think, about 20 or 22,000 against LAFC, who obviously a team from the US, but the West Coast, not the East Coast. And I guess my question, in a very, very long-winded way, but it's a braai, so I can be long-winded, right? Is that if you're a true football nation, would you not sell out these games? Because there is a train of thought that if this was in Europe, or if this was in South America, no matter the time of the day, people will come out 3 in the afternoon or in the evening. In Africa, we maybe have a different experience. If it's a big team, people will come out. But I know we'd struggle to sell out the Amazulu Golden Arrows derby in a 10,000 or 20,000 seater stadium like King Goodwill's Welitini or Princess Magogo or the Chatsworth Stadium. My point is, like, I'm in two minds about if you're a football nation, you always sell out your games versus not being a football nation. And I guess I wanted to get your take on, are the Americans a football nation or not?
I think it's almost an unfair question in reflecting on the U.S. because the U.S. is is too big of a country to make a statement like that. Like there is so many people in this country are football obsessed. And I think you just need to go to specific cities to see that, but other cities they're not. I think the attendance issues. First of all, I don't think they're big issues. There's very very few international tournaments that are able to attract major crowds to every single game. I think with all due respect, our European brothers and sisters have almost the opinion that it should. Certainly, the way they've reported on this tournament, uh, and partially because in Europe, generally for the Euros and World Cups, they can do it. Let me tell you, Zayn, that's because it's a small continent. Okay, if you're hosting Euros across Africa, you wouldn't get people traveling because at the AFCON, at this last AFCON, was in West Africa, probably the best attended AFCON, I think, in history. And there were still the occasional games that are empty because, with all due respect, someone from Mozambique traveling to Cote d'Ivoire is impossible. Like financially, it's just not. And that's the same with this Club World Cup. The Sundowns game was held up as like, yeah, look at this empty stands. You've got two teams coming from opposite sides of the world, traveling more than almost anyone just to get here, and from countries that have big fan bases, right? But in Sundown's case, we know the situation in South Africa. There's not 30,000 Masandawana fans who are able to drop 10 grand to come USD to come to support them. So for me, then there's the other side of things is FIFA have been building it up, and I think that's why the coverage has been quite negative because FIFA's like, it's going to be amazing, it's going to be so well attended, da 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 da. And I think in that sense, it's FIFA's poor report, like marketing and advertising, right? It's FIFA's fault. Like, you can't be starting a new tournament in a country that, yes, there's a lot of people that take football seriously in the US, but it's not a footballing country. Its priorities are in the NFL, NBA, and that's okay. That's okay. But you can't be hosting in a country like this and then saying the minimum price for a ticket is $200, $230 or whatever it is. That for me is ridiculous. And then on the flip side, they then get flack from all these other media outlets for offering tickets for $4 towards the end of Inter Miami game against Ahly. That is embarrassing, but not necessarily because you're handing out $4 tickets. Because I think for a tournament like this, you're trying to build up growth, you're trying to build attention. Every single ticket should have been that expensive, from the start. There should be every single game. This ticket should have been affordable, and FIFA instead decided to go embrace this American model of dynamic pricing. And unfortunately, they got it completely wrong because they assumed the interest would be greater than it was, and they tried to drum up that interest artificially. So for me, it's a terrible reflection on FIFA because of their bad marketing. It's not a bad reflection on the U.S. I don't think the U.S. is like, and I think it's reductionistic to be thinking, oh, this is not a serious football country. This is a serious football country because there's so many factors that impact where people are going to play. Now, for me, there are question marks around certain stadiums being used. Like, for instance, going to Miami, the Miami Stadium, it's beautiful, it's amazing, a nightmare to get to. I spoke to some Inter Miami season ticket holders, and they were like, we're not going because it's hard to get to, it's expensive, you have to pay for a $60 Uber, and this isn't even Inter Miami Stadium. So, yeah, I think most of the blame for attendance lies with FIFA and not necessarily the tournament, I don't think, or the US. I think it's mainly actually just the way FIFA have gone about it.
Ali, finger on the pulse. For those listening out there, please leave a comment, leave a review. You know where to find us on social. Ali, I know you've got to head to New York very shortly, but give people a bit of a taster. What are they going to get in the next pod? What are they going to get from you over the course of this tournament?
Zayn, that is a very good question.
As he has
what
come to.
I'm trying to figure out. Well, let me tell you, I can't tell you where I'll be, what I'll be doing throughout the rest of the tournament because it changes every day. I can't even tell you where I'm sleeping. I mean, in Miami, I was sleeping in what felt like a Russian kind of human trafficking den, but I'll tell that story a different time. All I know is I'll be at the Al-Ahly game tomorrow. I think it'll be amazing. The crowd between them and Palmeiras will be fantastic because that's what this Club World Cup is about. South American and African countries bringing the heat. So I'm buzzing for that. And I'm buzzing for the rest of the tournament, particularly following Al-Ahly, Sundowns, Esperance, and Wydad.
Ali Howorth, thank you for being our man on the ground. Thank you for filing all the content. We look forward to wherever you're going to be and hopefully some beautiful stuff on social media. Wish you well, brother. Enjoy your coach ride.